because that's ultimately where we as a company start from. So science writ large is a public good. Now that's not just that you pay for it, but you do. It is something that is there that generates knowledge to help us as a community, as a global community. It is a moral imperative that we do a better job of getting things out there. Because the literature is actually kind of quite clear. From time of publication to time of implementation, it can take up to 17 years for something to get out there. 17 years. So there are a lot of really sort of practical consequences for this. Students are not getting the best knowledge. You know, my head's still spinning from the previous session, and you know, we're talking about sort of modernizing education. You know, are we modernizing to 2022, or are we modernizing to 2005? Industries may not be aware of current developments, so things that are the cutting edge of innovation might not be getting out there. And you know, most importantly, patients may not be getting the best treatment. Do doctors have the most up-to-date knowledge about what does it take to treat specific conditions? So we often ask people working in this space, you know, how much time do you spend staying current with the scientific, the published, the peer-reviewed literature? And the answer is invariably not much. And then the follow-up was, well, how much time do you want, in this case your doctor, to stay up to date? How much time would you want these professionals to spend making sure that the hottest stuff off the presses is being used and integrated into their thinking when they're making clinical decisions about you, your kids, or your parents? So what is this thing we cooked up? Well, it's just basically given time. It's just a better use of time. So PubTrawlr is a web-based tool that takes thousands upon thousands of peer-reviewed articles and synthesizes, drills them down, clusters them so that we can identify the themes, topics, and trends and key findings across them. And we do that by leveraging AI and a specific subset of that called natural language processing. So let's pretend for a second that you're my buddy Joe. So Joe has a three-year-old. His name is Austin, and Austin was diagnosed on the spectrum, the autism spectrum disorder. So, you know, Joe doesn't know anything about that, and he wants to be an informed parent. Where's he going to go for information? So I just pulled a couple of the databases that you might be able to look at. You know, oh, is that it's on automatic shuffle? So maybe you start at Google, and you're going to get the phone book back, and things are going to be of varying quality. But you know, Joe's an educated dude, so you might go to something more specific. There's just sort of no way to screen through this stuff. The ways that things come back from these academic articles and these academic databases are often ranked based off of relevance of keywords or of recency. So what PubTrawlr does is it takes thousands of articles, in this case we pulled close to 3,000 articles, and clusters them down into 25. So we've effectively reduced key findings down into a manageable number that's going to help Joe be a better advocate for Austin. So what this looks like in practice is we generate a bunch of different visualizations that help people understand the way that things are relating to one another. And we published this article right here, me and my colleague Victoria. We published on the underlying science behind this last year. If you want to look it up, it's an open source article. But we do things that people can easily engage with. So this is something I did before we got here, looking at psychological safety and nursing. What are the main words that are appearing there? This is an example of different topics that are coming up in what's known as implementation science. So most of the stuff is in mental health, some stuff in learning, some stuff in psychological testing, and so on. So to do this, we pull in data from a bunch of different sources. So we're aggregating the medical and social science literature, so that's about 80 million articles. We're pulling in articles from computer science, from physics and astrophysics, mostly like sort of like the harder, more physical sciences. Pulling in things from education, because the education literature does not perfectly overlap the social science literature. You'll get stuff on like reading effectiveness and so on. And we're working to pull in other databases as well. Environmental science is something that we're currently cooking up. All of these things, by the way, are publicly available. So like we don't have any like licenses with like providers like Elsevier or anything. We're scraping these publicly governmentally indexed databases of these articles that it's just, they're there. But the sense-making process to help make use of these things isn't there. And that's where PubTrawlr is jumping in. So right now, what we're doing is we basically paused our website. And this was an idea of Steve's that has just borne so much fruit. Like, there's no purpose in doing any of this unless it's useful. Like, that's the whole idea of PubTrawlr is we're making things more accessible to our friends sitting out here. We're making things more accessible to you. So we're taking a lot of time to really sit down and talk with psychologists, talk with teachers, talk with students, talk with research professors, talk with community-based practitioners about how they use scientific information, what the barriers are to using scientific information, and then how can we redesign to adjust for those factors. Because, again, we want this stuff out there. We want this stuff to be used. So we ask people, what are the things like the barriers to engaging with scientific research? Time is one, that's where the synthesis comes in. Jargon is another, and that's where algorithms like text simplification come in to sort of remove jargon-based words. And then what are the things that we can do to make things more accessible to people we're talking to and their colleagues? So how can we spread this around? How can we design an output that makes sense for the hardcore research scientist who has hundreds of articles to go through, but also my buddy Joe, who wants just to understand what is the best possible behavioral treatment for a 3-year-old with autism. So while we're under this veil to do this really deep customer research, we launched this newsletter, which is sort of a preview of the types of things that we do, called The Week in Science. So what we do is we scrape the articles from pretty much the most influential journals out there, the top 5. So this is like Science, Nature, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Society, and does it say it there? And Lancet. So we pull from those, and we cluster all of the articles that have been published in the week. Sometimes it's 30, sometimes it's 100. And we say, okay, of these, what are the most representative? What are the things that really made a difference over the past week? And we summarize those findings in plain language, again, using AI algorithms. Of course, we review it, but the idea is, what's the key message that you can take from this? What have we learned over the past week. We see some stuff on quantum, so that's coming from the physics literature and things that we're doing with very, very low state matter. But we also recognize that there's an educational component to our mission. So it's not enough just to sort of throw a product out there and say, see you later. So one thing that we're doing, I guess a week from today, is we're running a really short webinar, half an hour, with one of my colleagues who is a Penn State alumni, worked with, does anyone know EPIS, the Evidence Prevention Institute? All right, so no one knows EPIS. But she worked with EPIS, and EPIS is a Penn State initiative. So her and I, we're running a webinar basically talking about, well, what are the meta lessons that you need to read a scientific article? So if I were to throw something down in front of you, could you extract sort of the main things from it? Could you engage it? This is not like you're picking up some William Faulkner here. There are different styles of writing, different styles of engaging, and different ways you can get the information from it. And we have some systems that, mental heuristics that you can do to make this much easier. So I actually put the QR code up here. If you want to register for this webinar, it's totally free. It's just important for us to be able to sort of use different levers to get this idea out there. Next Thursday to 2 o'clock, if you're interested, you can come and talk to me or Steve about that. And really, what we see happening in the next couple months is really building out this sort of really small version of our work while we continue to do this deeper customer research. So we're going to continue with the Week in Science newsletter. We're going to be starting a referral program so that people are better able to share and are incentivized to share because we want people to be more fluent in this. We're going to be providing things like long-form articles that really go into depth on scientific issues. But we also want to recognize that you may have specialized interests. I fly with a bunch of public health people, so they have an interest in the public health sector. I certainly know more than enough teachers who have an interest in that pedagogical literature. So we want to be able to continue to develop more specialized issues, so to speak, to help distribute this. And this is all in service of building out our core algorithm so that when we come back around, hopefully October, November-ish, after talking to a couple hundred people about what makes science useful, we release this back to the world and help people more effectively consume this stuff. And that's why. Because this is not just a fun coding project. This is something that we view as, like I said, a moral imperative, because we all know that the consequences of scientific illiteracy, and the more that we can move the needle a little bit and ease the barriers for consumption, well, that's a win for me, it's a win for Steve, and hopefully it's a win for all of you. So I'm done yapping, and that's all I got.